On the night of her 19th birthday, Zara Mitchell sat alone in the rain outside the mansion that had been her prison for years. Her wheelchair was already soaked through. Her parents had just thrown her out like garbage, calling her exactly that to her face. They didn't even let her pack properly. Just a backpack with some clothes and her medical documents shoved inside a plastic bag. The iron gates closed behind her with a sound that felt final, absolute. She had nowhere to go. No money. No family. The city of Neosol Heights stretched out before her, cold and indifferent, its towers glowing against the night sky like they were mocking her. This is the story of how that abandoned girl became the most feared woman in the criminal underworld. Her mother's last words still echoed in her head. "You've been nothing but a financial drain and an embarrassment. We're done pretending you're part of this family." Her father hadn't even looked at her when he said she was a bad investment. Her brother Ethan had filmed the whole thing on his phone, laughing. The accident that put her in this wheelchair happened when she was 12. 7 years of watching her family's love turn to resentment, then to outright contempt. 7 years of being treated like a mistake they couldn't undo. And now, on the exact day she became a legal adult, they'd made their choice clear. The Mitchell family had always been about image. Richard Mitchell ran a luxury real estate empire in Neosol Heights, and Elaine Mitchell was obsessed with maintaining their status in the city's elite social circles. When Zara's accident happened during a family ski trip, everything changed. The girl who was supposed to become a socialite, who was supposed to marry well and expand the family's influence, became what her mother called unmarketable. The physical therapy was expensive. The modifications to the house were expensive. The special equipment was expensive. And worst of all, in Elaine's mind, having a disabled daughter was socially expensive. Ethan, 2 years younger than Zara, became the golden child by default. Every resource got redirected to him. Private tutors, elite prep schools, sports training, business mentorship from their father. Zara watched her bedroom get converted into an extension of Ethan's gaming and study wing. She got moved to a smaller room on the first floor, away from the family. Her physical therapy sessions got cut from 5 times a week to once a week, then to nothing. Her mother stopped inviting her to family events. "It's better if you stay home," Elaine would say. "People ask too many questions and it makes everyone uncomfortable." The breaking point came 3 months before her 19th birthday. Richard announced at dinner that he was cutting off all of Zara's medical expenses. "You're almost an adult," he said, cutting into his steak without looking at her. "It's time you learned to be self-sufficient. We've invested enough." Zara had tried to argue. She tried to explain that she needed ongoing care, that her condition required management, that she couldn't just survive on nothing. Her father's response was cold and final. "Then figure it out. That's what adults do." Her mother had nodded in agreement. Ethan had smirked. That was the moment Zara realized she was truly alone in that house. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The streets of Neosol Heights weren't designed for someone in a wheelchair. The sidewalks were uneven, the curb cuts were poorly maintained, and the rain made everything slippery and dangerous. Zara's arms burned as she pushed herself forward, trying to find shelter, trying to find anywhere that wasn't the freezing rain. People passed by her. Some stared. Some took out their phones and filmed her. Nobody helped. She tried to get into a coffee shop to warm up and maybe use the bathroom, but the manager told her she needed to buy something first. She had $12 in her pocket. She made it to a bus shelter around midnight and collapsed there, shivering. Her clothes were soaked. Her hands were blistered from pushing the wheelchair. She was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. This was the exhaustion of having no options, no future, no way forward. She thought about calling a shelter, but her phone was almost dead and she didn't know any numbers. She thought about going to the police, but what would she even say? My family doesn't want me anymore? That wasn't illegal. She was 19. Legally, they had every right to kick her out. Around 2 in the morning, she started to understand what freezing to death might actually feel like. Her body had stopped shivering. That was a bad sign. She knew that much from a health class she'd taken years ago. When your body stops shivering, it means it's giving up on keeping you warm. She closed her eyes, not sure if she'd open them again. Then she heard the cars. Multiple engines, expensive and powerful. She opened her eyes to see 3 black luxury vehicles pulling up to the curb in front of the bus shelter. The doors opened and men in dark suits stepped out. And then he appeared. Kang Min-jae was 30 years old and looked like he'd never been anything other than dangerous. He wore an expensive black coat that probably cost more than her family's monthly mortgage. His hair was perfectly styled despite the rain. But what caught Zara's attention were his eyes. They were sharp and calculating, the eyes of someone who saw everything and forgot nothing. He had a tattoo visible on his neck, a crimson lotus flower with dragon scales winding around it. She recognized the symbol. Everyone in Neo-Seoul Heights knew what it meant. The Crimson Lotus Syndicate, the most powerful criminal organization in the city. He walked straight toward her, ignoring the rain, and stopped a few feet from the bus shelter. His guards stayed back, hands in their coats, watching the empty street. Min-jae looked at Zara for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. How long have you been out here? Zara didn't answer immediately. She was trying to figure out if this was rescue or a different kind of danger. I asked you a question, he said, his tone not threatening but absolutely expecting an answer. Since 9, Zara said, her voice hoarse from the cold. My family kicked me out. Min-jae's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking in rapid Korean that Zara couldn't follow. Then he put the phone away and looked at her again. You're coming with me, he said. It wasn't a question. Zara felt fear spike through her exhaustion. I don't know you, she said. You don't need to, Min-jae replied. But you're dying out here and I'm offering you a chance not to. Your choice. 2 of his guards moved forward and Min-jae held up a hand, stopping them. He walked into the bus shelter himself, crouched down to be at eye level with Zara, and said something that would change everything. No one abandons what belongs under my protection, and right now you need protection. So you can either freeze to death out here to prove a point, or you can accept help from someone who actually sees you as worth saving. Decide now. Zara looked into his eyes and saw something she hadn't seen in 7 years. He was actually looking at her, not at the wheelchair, not at her disability, at her. She nodded. The penthouse was at the top of the tallest building in Neo-Seoul Heights, the kind of place Zara had only seen in magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the entire city spread out below like a circuit board. The interior was sleek and modern, all clean lines and expensive materials. But what stood out was the security. Armed guards at every entrance, cameras everywhere, reinforced doors that looked like they belonged in a bank vault. This wasn't just a luxury apartment. This was a fortress. Min-jae's guards helped Zara out of her wet clothes and into a warm bathroom. A woman appeared, introduced herself as Lee, and helped Zara into a hot shower. Lee didn't ask questions, didn't make comments, just provided clean clothes and showed her to a bedroom that was bigger than her entire first-floor room at her parents' house. The bed had been modified with handles and supports. The bathroom was fully accessible. Someone had prepared this room specifically for someone in a wheelchair. How did you know? Zara asked Lee. Boss makes sure every room can accommodate any need, Lee replied. He believes in being prepared. When Zara was finally warm and dry, Lee brought her to a dining room where Min-jae was waiting. He changed into casual clothes, and without the dramatic coat and rain, he looked almost normal, almost The tattoos visible on his forearms told a different story. He gestured to a chair across from him, and Lee helped Zara transfer from her wheelchair. Food appeared. More food than Zara had seen in months. Real food, not the scraps her family had been giving her. Eat, Min-jae said. Then we'll talk. Zara ate because she was starving, but her mind was racing. She kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. For Min-jae to explain what he wanted from her. What price she'd have to pay for this rescue. Men like him didn't help people out of kindness. There had to be an angle. When she finally couldn't eat anymore, she looked up to find him watching her with that same calculating expression. You're wondering what I want, he said, reading her easily. Yes, Zara admitted. There was no point in lying. Good, Min-jae said. That means you're smart. We're going to need that. How would you feel if you were thrown away by your own family just for being different? Would you have gotten into that car? Or would fear have made you choose the streets? Min-jae explained it simply. The Crimson Lotus Syndicate was an empire built on loyalty, strategy, and power. But Min-jae had one problem. He was young to be leading such an organization, and the older council members questioned his stability. They wanted proof he could build something lasting, something beyond just violence and money. They wanted him to show he could create a legacy. Their solution was traditional and frustrating. He needed a wife, not because he wanted one, but because the council demanded it as a condition of their continued support. I could marry anyone, Min-jae said, leaning back in his chair. There are plenty of women from syndicate families who would jump at the opportunity, but they all want the same thing. Power through me, control over me, a way to manipulate the organization through marriage. He paused, his eyes sharp on Zara. You don't want any of that. You just want to survive. That makes you more trustworthy than anyone else I could choose. Zara processed this slowly. You want to marry me because I'm desperate? She asked, unable to keep the bitterness out of her voice. I want to marry you because you have nothing to gain by betraying me, Min-jae corrected, and because I can offer you something real in return. Legal protection, medical care, financial security, respect, a position of power that no one can ever take from you. You'd be my wife in name and in public. The council would be satisfied, and you'd never have to worry about being abandoned again. He slid a document across the table. It was a contract written in clear terms. Legal marriage, separate living spaces within the penthouse, full medical coverage, a monthly allowance that made Zara's eyes widen, access to security and resources, no requirement for physical intimacy unless both parties agreed. This is a business arrangement, Min-jae said. I need a wife to satisfy the council. You need protection and resources to survive. We both benefit. And I promise you this, no one will ever treat you as less than human again. Not while you carry my name. Zara looked at the contract, then at Min-jae, then back at the contract. This was happening too fast. Hours ago, she'd been freezing to death in a bus shelter. Now she was being offered marriage to a mafia boss. It should have felt like jumping from one prison to another. But something in Min-jae's directness, in the clarity of the offer, felt more honest than anything her biological family had ever given her. What if I say no? Zara asked. Then Lee will help you find a safe place to stay. You'll get a month's worth of money to get on your feet, and you'll never hear from me again. Min-jae replied without hesitation. I don't keep people against their will. That's a rule I don't break. Zara believed him. She didn't know why, but she did. She picked up the pen that was sitting next to the contract. Her hand shook slightly as she signed her name. Min-jae signed below her signature, and just like that, Zara Mitchell became Zara Mitchell-kong. The wheelchair girl that nobody wanted had just become the wife of the most dangerous man in Neo-Seoul Heights. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it happened with the efficiency of an organization that knew how to get things done. Min-jae brought in physical therapists who actually listened to Zara's needs instead of just running through standard exercises. They worked on building her upper body strength, on improving her mobility within her limitations, on managing her pain without just throwing pills at her. For the first time since the accident, Zara felt like her body was something she could work with instead of just endure. But the physical therapy was just the beginning. Min-jae hired combat trainers who specialized in wheelchair self-defense. At first, Zara thought it was excessive. But the head trainer, a former Special Forces operative named Chun, explained it differently. "You're going to be in the public eye as his wife," Chun said. "That makes you a target. You need to know how to protect yourself because we can't always be there fast enough." The training was brutal. Learning how to use her wheelchair as a weapon, how to strike from a seated position, how to read a room for threats, how to carry and use weapons designed for her specific needs. Zara discovered she was angry enough to be good at it. Then came the business education. Min-jae's right-hand advisor, a sharp woman named Sarah Park, taught Zara about the syndicate's operations, not the illegal parts. Min-jae kept her separated from anything that could legally compromise her, but the legitimate business fronts, real estate, import-export companies, tech startups. The syndicate was an empire, and Zara needed to understand how empires worked. Sarah was ruthless in her teaching. "You're going to be the wife of the boss," Sarah said. "That means people will test you. They'll try to see if you're weak. You need to be smarter than they expect and harder than they can handle." The fashion education came last but made the biggest visual impact. A designer named Torres, who specialized in adaptive fashion, created an entire wardrobe for Zara. Gowns that were specifically designed to look elegant while seated. Fabrics that wouldn't bunch or wrinkle. Colors that commanded attention. Jewelry that made statements. Torres understood something important. The wheelchair was part of Zara's look, not something to hide. He designed around it, incorporated it, made it part of her aesthetic. When Zara looked in the mirror after the first full styling session, she saw someone she didn't recognize. Someone powerful. Someone who refused to disappear. 6 months after signing that contract, Zara had transformed from a scared girl in a bus shelter to someone the syndicate members had started calling the Wheelchair Empress. The nickname started as mockery from some of the older members who resented Min-jae's choice, but Zara owned it. She walked into meetings with her head high, spoke with authority, and never once apologized for existing. Min-jae watched her transformation with something that might have been pride. Their relationship remained professional, but respect had grown between them. She'd proven she could handle the pressure. He'd proven he meant what he said about protection and dignity. If you've ever been underestimated because of how you look or what you can't do, drop a comment below. How did you prove them wrong? The gala was Neo Seoul Heights' biggest annual charity event, attended by everyone who mattered in the city's elite circles. Min-jae had never brought a date before. His arrival with Zara sent shockwaves through the room before they even made it past the entrance. The press was everywhere. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. And Zara rolled into that chaos wearing a custom crimson gown, her wheelchair's chrome framework polished to mirror brightness. Her head held high. The message was clear. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't apologizing. She was here and she belonged. The whispers started immediately. People recognized her. The Mitchell family was well known in these circles, and the scandal of them throwing out their disabled daughter had been gossip fodder for months. Now here she was, on the arm of Kang Min-jae, looking like royalty. The cameras loved it. Within an hour, photos were trending on every social media platform. Mafia boss marries disabled girl was the headline that kept repeating. Zara hated it and loved it at the same time. Hated the reductive framing. Loved that her family would see it and know exactly what they'd lost. Min-jae had arranged for Zara to give a brief speech during the charity auction portion of the evening. She'd been nervous about it, but Sarah had coached her through it. Speak from the truth, Sarah had said. That's more powerful than any script. When Zara's name was called, the room went quiet. She rolled up to the microphone, looked out at the sea of faces, some curious, some hostile, some sympathetic, and began. I was thrown away because people decided I wasn't worth the investment, she said, her voice steady and clear. Because a wheelchair made me invisible to the people who were supposed to love me most. But invisibility is a choice that others make. I refused to accept it. The speech was short, but it landed hard. She talked about dignity, about the way society treats disability as a tragedy instead of just a fact of life, about the strength it takes to survive in a world that's built to exclude you. She didn't mention her family by name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Not polite charity applause. Real applause. Min-jae stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, and the cameras caught that moment. The image would be on the front page of every news outlet in the city by morning. Zara Mitchell-Kong had just announced herself to the world. Richard Mitchell was having drinks with business partners when his phone started blowing up with notifications. He pulled it out, annoyed, and then went completely still as he saw the headlines. Photos of Zara at the gala, videos of her speech, articles about her marriage to Kang Min-jae. His face drained of color. The men he was drinking with had their phones out too, and the looks they were giving Richard ranged from shock to disgust. That's your daughter, isn't it? One of them asked. Richard didn't know how to answer. Elaine found out at her weekly society luncheon when one of the other women showed her a tablet with the news pulled up. The table went silent. Every woman there knew the story. Elaine had complained often and loudly about her disabled daughter being a burden. She told these women that Zara was better off on her own, that the family had done everything they could, that sometimes you had to make hard choices. Now those same women were looking at her like she was something they'd scraped off their shoes. You threw her out and she married into the Crimson Lotus? One woman said, her voice dripping with something between awe and horror. Do you have any idea what you've done? Ethan was in his gaming room when his phone started pinging with messages from friends. He opened them to find links to articles about his sister. First, he laughed. The idea of Zara with some mafia boss was ridiculous. But then he started reading, started seeing the photos, started understanding what this meant. His parents had thrown out the girl who was now connected to the most powerful criminal organization in the city. The girl who could destroy them with a single word if she wanted to. Ethan felt something he'd never associated with his sister before. Fear. The call came 3 days after the gala. Zara was in her study, working through language lessons, when her phone rang with a number she deleted but still recognized. Her mother. For a moment, Zara considered not answering, but curiosity won. She picked up. Zara, sweetheart. Elaine's voice came through, honey sweet and completely fake. I saw the news. I'm so happy for you. We should talk. Maybe you could come to dinner? The family misses you so much. Zara let the silence stretch out for a moment before responding. Her voice was cold and level. You threw me out 6 months ago. You called me a financial drain. You said I was unmarketable. Now you want me to come to dinner. Elaine's composure cracked slightly. We made mistakes. We were stressed. But family is family, right? We can move past this. Zara almost laughed. You want to move past this now that I'm useful again. Now that I have connections you want. That's not fair, Elaine said. And now there was an edge to her voice. We raised you. We took care of you after the accident. You resented me after the accident, Zara corrected. You made sure I knew every single day that I was costing you money and embarrassing you. You took away my therapy. You converted my bedroom. You stopped inviting me to family events. And when I turned 19, you threw me out in the rain with nothing. So no, mother. I won't be coming to dinner. I won't be moving past this. And I won't be pretending we're family. Elaine's voice turned sharp. You're making a mistake. You think that man actually cares about you? He's using you. And when he's done, you'll have nothing again. Zara smiled, even though her mother couldn't see it. Maybe he is using me, but at least he's honest about it. At least he treats me like a person worth something. That's more than you ever did. She hung up before Elaine could respond. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From the release of finally saying what she'd needed to say for 7 years. Min-jae appeared in the doorway of her study a few minutes later. He didn't ask if she was okay. He just said, "They'll keep trying." Zara nodded. "Let them try." Min-jae's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile. "Good answer." He paused, then added, "If they become a problem, let me know. I can make problems disappear." He said it casually, but Zara knew he meant it literally. She nodded again. Having that kind of protection should have felt wrong. Instead, it felt like the first real safety she'd ever known. 3 months after the confrontation call, Ethan was desperate. His father's business was hemorrhaging partners. Turns out that kicking out your disabled daughter and having her marry into a criminal syndicate was bad for your reputation. Richard's real estate empire was crumbling. The family's accounts were being drained to cover debts and legal fees from deals that were suddenly falling through. Elaine had been dropped from every social circle she'd spent years cultivating. And Ethan, who had never worked a day in his life, was suddenly being told there was no more money for his lifestyle. He tried reaching out to Zara through social media, through mutual acquaintances, through anyone who might have her contact information. She'd blocked everything. So Ethan did what desperate, stupid people do. He decided to take what he thought he was owed. He started researching Zara's schedule, her security detail, her public appearances. He found out she did a weekly charity visit to a greenhouse that employed people with disabilities. The security there was lighter than at other locations. It was his best chance. Ethan recruited 3 guys he'd met through online gaming forums. Guys who talked big about not being afraid of anything and who needed money. He didn't tell them who Zara was married to. He just told them she was rich, vulnerable, and worth a ransom. The plan was simple and stupid in equal measure. Grab her during the greenhouse visit, take her to an abandoned warehouse Ethan had found, demand money from Min-jae, and disappear before anyone could track them down. It was the plan of someone who'd watched too many movies and had never faced real consequences for anything in his life. The day of the kidnapping attempt, Zara was examining orchids with the greenhouse manager when she noticed something off. One of the workers she didn't recognize. He was too focused on her, not on his work. Training kicked in. Chen's voice in her head telling her to trust her instincts. She casually signaled to her primary guard, Lee, who was standing by the entrance. Lee's hand went to her earpiece. But before anything could happen, Ethan and his recruits made their move. They came in fast, masks on, guns out. Amateur hour. What they didn't know was that Min-jae had trackers on Zara's wheelchair and her phone. What they didn't know was that the syndicate's response time to a threat against Zara was under 3 minutes. What they didn't know was that the abandoned warehouse they'd chosen was actually syndicate property that Min-jae had been watching for weeks after getting intelligence that someone was planning something stupid. Ethan's crew managed to get Zara into a van. They managed to drive exactly 4 blocks. Then the syndicate's vehicles surrounded them, and everything went sideways fast. Min-jae personally led the extraction. The van was forced to stop. Doors were ripped open. Ethan's recruits were pulled out and dealt with by syndicate security. Min-jae himself found Ethan cowering in the back of the van. Mask off, gun dropped, hands up. For a long moment, Min-jae just looked at him. Then he spoke, his voice quiet and absolutely terrifying. "You tried to take my wife. It wasn't a question." Ethan stammered something about needing money, about the family falling apart, about just wanting what was fair. Min-jae backhanded him across the face hard enough to split his lip. Zara was pulled from the van by Lee, checked for injuries, found to be unharmed but furious. She rolled up to where Min-jae had Ethan pinned against the side of the van. Ethan looked at her, blood on his chin, terror in his eyes. "Zara, please," he said. "We're family." Zara's expression didn't change. "You filmed me being thrown out and laughed about it. You're not my family. You're just someone who shares my DNA. There's a difference." She looked at Min-jae. "He's not worth killing, but he needs to understand what happens when you come after what's yours. Have you ever wanted revenge on people who hurt you? How far would you go?" Min-jae didn't kill Ethan, but what he did was arguably worse. He dismantled the Mitchell family's entire existence piece by piece. The real estate empire that Richard had built over 30 years collapsed in 3 weeks. Suddenly, every loan was called in. Every business partner backed out. Every deal fell through. Inspectors found violations in every property. Lawsuits appeared from buyers claiming fraud. It was systematic and brutal. Richard tried to fight back, tried to leverage connections, tried to call in favors. But no one wanted to cross Kong Min-jae for the family that had thrown away their daughter. Elaine's social destruction was even more surgical. Invitations stopped coming. Former friends wouldn't return calls. The charities she'd chaired asked her to step down. Someone leaked emails she'd sent about Zara, calling her daughter a burden and an investment failure, to a gossip blog. The public outrage was immediate and vicious. Elaine tried to do damage control, tried to claim she'd been misunderstood, tried to play the victim. It didn't work. Society had made its judgment. Ethan faced criminal charges for the kidnapping attempt. His recruits took plea deals and testified against him. He was looking at serious prison time. The final confrontation happened when the Mitchell's mansion was foreclosed on. Min-jae had arranged for the syndicate to buy it at auction. He brought Zara there on the day the family was being evicted. They sat in a black car across the street and watched as Richard, Elaine, and Ethan carried boxes out to a moving truck. The family that had lived in luxury was now being forced out with whatever they could carry. Min-jae looked at Zara. "Say the word and I'll let them keep the house." One word. Zara watched her former family struggle with boxes they'd never had to carry themselves before. She watched her mother crying. She watched her father's shoulders slumped in defeat. She watched Ethan looking around like he was hoping someone would save him. She felt something, but it wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was just emptiness where family should have been. "No," she said quietly. "They made their choices. They chose status over me, money over me, image over me. Let them live with those choices." Min-jae got out of the car and walked across the street. The Mitchells froze when they saw him. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking relaxed and completely in control. "You had a daughter who needed you and you threw her away," he said, his voice carrying clearly. "You decided she wasn't worth your time or money, so now you get to learn what it feels like to have nothing. If any of you ever approach Zara again, if you ever try to contact her, if you even speak her name where she might hear it, I will finish what I started. This is your only warning." He turned and walked back to the car. The Mitchells didn't say a word. Zara and Min-jae drove away from that mansion and Zara didn't look back. Not once. Min-jae reached over and squeezed her hand briefly. It was the first genuinely affectionate gesture he'd made in their entire arrangement. "You did good," he said. Zara nodded. She'd survived being abandoned. She'd built herself into something powerful. And she'd faced the people who'd hurt her without breaking. That was its own kind of victory. 1 year later, Zara stood in front of a new building in Neo-Seoul Heights. The sign above the door read Phoenix House, a home for abandoned youth. It was her project, funded entirely by her and operating independently from the syndicate. A place where kids who'd been thrown away by their families could find safety, resources, and a path forward. A place that didn't care about disability or image or any of the superficial things that made people disposable in the eyes of others. Min-jae stood beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder in that gesture that had become familiar over the months. Their relationship had evolved beyond the business arrangement they'd started with. They weren't in love. Zara didn't know if Min-jae was capable of love in the traditional sense. But they were partners in every way that mattered. They trusted each other. They protected each other. They'd built something real in the space between a mafia empire and a second chance. The syndicate had accepted Zara completely. She attended council meetings. She managed legitimate business operations. She'd become exactly what Min-jae had promised she could be. Untouchable. The disability foundations she'd started were gaining international attention. She'd become a speaker, an advocate, someone who refused to let anyone's story end just because the world decided they weren't worth investing in. She used her platform to talk about ableism, about family rejection, about the strength it takes to survive when the people who should love you decide you're not enough. Her social media following was massive. Her influence was real. She'd gone from invisible to impossible to ignore. On the night of the Phoenix House opening, as Zara watched the first group of kids move into their new rooms, she thought about that girl in the bus shelter. Cold, wet, abandoned, and certain she was going to die. That girl had become this woman, the wheelchair empress of Crimson Lotus, a queen who built her throne from the ashes of rejection. Min-jae came up beside her and looked at the building. "You did this," he said. "We did this," Zara corrected. He nodded, accepting the truth of that. They threw away a girl in a wheelchair on her 19th birthday, certain she was worthless. They created a queen who would never bow to anyone again. Blood doesn't make family. Loyalty does. Protection does. Respect does. Zara had learned that the hard way, and she'd built an empire on that truth. The Mitchell family was still out there somewhere, struggling and broken. She didn't think about them much anymore. They'd lost their power over her the moment she stopped needing their approval to know her own worth. That was the real victory. Not revenge. Not destruction. Just the absolute certainty that she was worth everything they said she wasn't. And nothing they did or said could ever take that away again. If the story moved you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. What would you have done in Zara's position? Let us know in the comments below.